the Formula One cars have just headed out onto the circuit. This is the qualifying for the Murray Walker Memorial Trophy for this Masters historic Formula One, and an opportunity for us to enjoy some interesting machinery from the 1970s and 1980s. It's more the 1980s, the general cars, but there's a few 1970s cars, and there's a six-wheeler Tyrrell in there as well. So some interesting machinery. One or two changes to the program entry, by the way, for those of you who do want to update your programs, and I will try and run through that a bit more. Didn't update you on the early one, sorry about that. So we do know, for example, that Johnny Herbert, who's entered in the number 8 car, sadly is now not doing it, but Michael Lyons will now be driving car number 8. So Michael Lyons, car number 8, who is going to be rapid as well. Jamie Constable, who was entered as number 45, is actually going to be number 99. So Jamie Constable is number 99. We have a couple of additions. Number 2 is Lucas Halusa. So number 2, Lucas Halusa. And in fact, that's the car that is on our screens at the moment, which is fun to see. The number 2 McLaren M23 of Lucas Halusa, and another additional entry, number 9, Judy Lyons in a Surtees TS9. So those are 2 additional entries. There were a few withdrawals as well. The numbers not playing a part are numbers 24, 30, 33 and 37. So those numbers, I'm afraid, are not in the race. 24, 30, 33 and 37. But we do have an interesting lineup, and as I was saying there, Alistair, it's lovely to see the McLaren out here of Lucas Halusa. This is the next Locket Mass car.
Yes, it is, and most of the cars here are original cars with history. We do have one, and you mentioned it, the six-wheel Tyrrell, which is actually a recreation of that car. It was built last year, or over the last couple of years. But yeah, all these cars have real history, and the Lucas Halusa car, Jochen Mass, debuted the car in 1973, and that car, actually, the M23, was incredibly long-lived in Grand Prix racing, because it was still racing in 1977. You don't get that these days, do you? But the technology at the time didn't move forward quite as quickly as they seem to these days. Worth mentioning that all of the cars are 3 litres, which was the formula at the time. They don't have turbochargers, therefore a lovely engine noise.
Yeah, it's a lovely noise which you can all enjoy, and for those of you who are outside and enjoying on the sidelines here at Silverstone, you can really enjoy that noise in a beautiful fashion. We are looking at the P34 Tyrrell now, briefly, because we're now looking at the Lotus number 12. That's the Lotus 91. This is Steve Brooks' car. He's pretty competitive, Steve, so see how it gets on. It's just stuttering along there. I hope that's not a problem, but we shall see, and hopefully it'll all hold together. So that's the Lotus 91, car number 12.
That was actually driven in period by Nigel Mansell and Elio Giangelis. Both drove the car, and our own Jeff Lees as well, a British driver who did occasional Grand Prix, also got behind the wheel of that particular car.
Let's just have a look what was going on here. Ah, right, okay, he came up behind a slower car and spun. I didn't realise that. That was at Copse. We just picked up that it was stuttering along a little bit. Now we know why. He did a complete 360 in a Formula One car, river wet, and thankfully he didn't hit either of the 2 cars that were around him and was able to continue. So that was quite fortunate with the Lotus 91. Thankfully it survived, and Steve Brooks is still going around. First quick lap is set by Michael Lyons, actually the man who has taken over the car from Johnny Herbert. That is the Ensign N180B. Everybody now getting up to speed. It's a relatively short qualifying session, this, so we've already got under 15 minutes to go. Kind of a 78. Have a quick look at that. Warren Briggs, a man who worked for McLaren himself in an M29.
And that car driven by John Watson, who a lot of people will know both from his time racing, but also, of course, he's been behind the microphone for a few years now. But John Watson himself drove that car, and best result was 4th place in USA and in Canada, driven by Watson.
There is Michael Lyons on our screens at the moment, so car number 8, if you see that around and about, that's the car that's quickest so far. That is the Ensign 180B, and That's with the car run in 1981 and 1982. Wasn't a front-running car, but Michael's doing a good job with it.
Yes, Michael Lyons, an incredibly quick driver, a young man. His father Frank and his mother Judy both race as well. But Michael, a contemporary sports car racer, a GT racer as well, and one of those drivers that can get in anything and drive it very quickly indeed.
Well, the water is still being chucked up by these treaded tyres. Car number 7, there's the beautiful Williams FW107C. Lovely to see that. Mike Cantillon, who's there, and he's done well, hasn't he, in historic Formula 1?
Yeah, he actually won a race that I was commentating on last year in this car. This is the ex-Carlos Reutemann 1981 car, and in fact Carlos had a very lacklustre race at Caesars Palace, the last race of the season, and effectively lost the championship by 1 point to Nelson Piquet in this very car, number 7, and never really explained why Carlos, who we lost only a few days ago, died a few days ago, but he lost that championship to Piquet in this car at Caesars Palace.
Yeah, it was a difficult time for him. Just gone second fastest, in fact, but Michael Lyons' lap, very impressive, 4.5 seconds faster than anybody else currently. Third fastest, we've got the number 16 car of Mark Hazel. That's another Williams, that's the FW08. As we're just keeping an eye on Mike Cantillon for the moment. But now we're going to switch back to, on our screens at least, to the McLaren of Lucas Salusa. As we said, that's an additional entry, the N23 1976 car, which is heading around, doing a good job so far, and moving up into third place now, Steve Hartley in another McLaren. I think it's another ex-Watty car, isn't it? The MP4-1, another of the McLarens that's out there. Steve Hartley, number 77, he's moved up into third position.
Yeah, ex-John Watson from 1982, Ben. That's the MP4-1, which is the one of the first cars. It was McLaren Project 4 was the MP4 nomenclature, and it was the first carbon composite F1 car.
Yes, indeed.
A real game changer.
It was. No, it was a really big time for McLaren around the time, well, Ron Dennis had just taken it over, and it soon became a very, very successful team. So, Chris Perkins in the number 19 car we're looking at on our screens at the moment. So that's the Surtees TS16. Very distinctive livery, very distinctive looking car with that huge airbox that sits over the cockpit, absorbing the air as much as possible. And it wasn't a particularly competitive car in its time, sadly, but in fact Watty drove one of these himself back in 1975, I believe.
He did, yes, and the best result for the car was a 4th place for Watson's teammate Carlos Pache in Brazil.
Michael Lyons still fastest in this Formula 1 Memorial Trophy race qualifying so far in car number 8, doing a lovely job. His lap time 2 minutes 11.6, still 4.1 seconds faster than anybody else in a car that in its time wasn't necessarily that quick. But so often that one thinks back, you know, some of these teams are running with quite limited budgets. Certainly there wasn't a huge budget at that time. This car was designed by Ralph Bellamy, who was a bit of a star, helped by Nigel Bennett as well. They didn't always have the money to develop the cars, though, whereas nowadays, of course, hopefully over the period of time that's gone, they can solve a lot of the little problems that they would have had over time.
I think if it's the same as last year, this particular car is actually prepped by the University of Bolton students.
Oh, lovely.
So that's really bringing the next generation of engineers through, and it's owned by Bob Fernley.
That's great. Good. Well, it's going well. Michael Lyons currently leading the way in terms of pace, and he's just done another fastest first sector and a fastest second sector, so it looks like he's going to further improve his provisional pole position at the moment. Still kicking the spray up behind him, and that's something about Formula 1 cars. This is looking so different, isn't it, to the other cars that we've seen out on track. They're little narrow tyres, so many of them, chucking up very little water. The Formula 1 cars throw up a lot of spray. It's difficult when you're following, of course, which is what he's doing as he comes down the Hamilton Straight and down towards Abbey Corner. So it's difficult to get a clear run through the first turn, but he's making the most of it. and he has improved his lap on that last lap. He's down at a 2-minute 10.5, so his advantage is now 5.2 seconds over Mike Cantillon in the Williams, who's second fastest so far. Lucas Alusa was third earlier, but he's dropped down to 6th position now, so maybe he can find some more pace. Currently in third place, Steve Hartley in the McLaren MP41.
And Steve Hartley, known as the Jam Baron, he's of the Hartley family, that Hartley's Jam, and he is a very, very quick driver indeed, and I wouldn't be surprised if he challenges perhaps the time of Michael Lyons. And we've got Steve Hartley on the screen now, the car number 77, which as we've said before was the real game changer for McLaren as Ron Dennis took over the team. And this car was driven in period by John Watson.
Yeah, it's a great machine, and of course taking our way back for Watty, it's 40 years since he won the British Grand Prix when he was driving for McLaren. That 1981 event, which was a key event and a really big win for John Watson, and here we are some 40 years later.
And John Watson actually drove this car to a win the year after, in 1982 at Detroit. He started 17th on the grid and won the race.
They used to struggle with getting the tyres to work in qualifying, and there were a couple of times where they really struggled. They didn't qualify for Monaco, did they? On that occasion, I think it was the same year. But once the car was in race, up to race setup, it would warm the tyres up okay, and then they would quit. But qualifying, it just did not make it work. So that made it very difficult. Now, looking at car number 15 here, that's Michael Baudouin in the Hesketh. Now the Hesketh, of course, great heritage. Hesketh, a car that led to the star James Hunt, who then of course did move to McLaren himself.
Yeah, that's right, yes, and it was such a great time in Grand Prix racing, and then Alexander, or Lord Hesketh, came along and set up the team with his team manager known as Bubbles Horsley. It was all great stuff, champagne and helicopters, and of course James Hunt, who was very similar in his outlook on life. This car actually was driven by Derek Daly and Eddie Cheever, and it was after James had left the team. The 308E was the last of the Heskeths produced before the team closed down.
Mark Hazel in the other Williams, the FW08C, currently 5th fastest. The car that was part of the 1982 season. That was the season, of course, that Keke Rosberg went on to win the championship with Williams.
Yeah, that's a period of domination for Williams through the sort of 80s and up to the Nigel Mansell, Nelson Piquet era. Tremendous successes for the family-owned team, Frank Williams.
It does feel, I have to say, when I was here at Silverstone a couple of weeks ago for the Grand Prix, Williams does feel different now that it's not the Williams family. And I really hope and wish them a lot of success, and I'm sure they'll get there. But without even Claire Williams being part of the team now, it's a different environment, different place, but let's hope that the Williams name is still going to bring success in the future. Oh, a bit of understeer there. Ow, nearly went off, but he just about managed to hold on to it. Understeering in the wet, Mark Hazel, but he got away with it. Michael Lyons still leading the pace by a big margin of 4 seconds exactly now it is over Cantillon. Hartley is third, Halusa fourth. Constable is next up in the 99 car, Jamie Constable. That's a Tyrrell 011, the 011. So we haven't seen that much yet, but Tyrrell, of course, a very significant team in the 1970s, the success in the early 70s with Jackie Stewart. They went through quite a lot of ups and downs in that time, but Ken Tyrrell was one of the masters of Formula One, really, wasn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. Another family team. His wife Nora used to make the sandwiches and feed the team members and the drivers. It was a different time in Formula One then, and the whole Tyrrell team was run out of a woodshed because Tyrrell himself was a timber merchant.
Yeah, I gather people are trying. There's a little bit of movement to try and save that because it's likely to be destroyed or demolished or whatever.
I think the building's past its prime, and they're talking about knocking it down. But it has such a history that the Tyrrell team went on and changed and became another team, and the name was lost to Grand Prix racing. But those years with Jackie Stewart and a driver who would have probably taken over from Stewart, Francois Sever, who sadly lost his life in an accident in America, but he would have probably taken over the mantle from Jackie Stewart and carried on the Tyrrell success.
Absolutely, no, he was a very, very talented driver, brilliant. Understeer there as well, you can see understeer seems to be a bit of a key thing for these guys at the moment on this rather slippery track. Still quite a lot of water around, still a little bit of rain in the air as well, so not that easy, chucking up the spray, running a little bit wide, but Steve Hartley is on a good lap at the moment. The estimate showing us that he may move up to second. He's currently third, but he's done a couple of reasonable first sectors. Let's see, it's not going to be a big margin. Let's just see, he's coming out of the last part of the lap now. Let's see whether he can move up a position, or is he going to stay in third? Yeah, no, he stays in third, doesn't quite go any quicker. He had already done a 2:14.6 and that was a 2:15.4. Back to Michael Lyons on our screens anyway. He's certainly one to watch because he's driving beautifully well, and we are getting a bit more rain again now. So it is going to be wetter out there on circuit once again. It's proving to be pretty challenging. The number 12 car's moved up. That's Steve Brooks in his Lotus 91 we saw earlier on, having the spin but surviving. And this car is Paul Tattersall, ensign, another ensign, the N179. Just a brief glimpse of him. As we look at the McLaren of Lucas Halusa again, he is now in 5th position. One of the other fun things about this entry, Alistair, is that we actually have a chap called Ken Tyrrell racing this weekend. We were talking about Ken Tyrrell, but it's not the same Ken Tyrrell.
No, and not related at all. The Ken Tyrrell that's driving is an American, no relation at all to the Tyrrell family, but when he decided he wants to spend his money on racing in Formula One, he thought, I'll race a Tyrrell.
Lovely.
Why not?
Yeah, that's great. So we've got a chap called Ken Tyrrell from America driving a Tyrrell 011 as well, and in fact that is him. That is Ken Tyrrell. We just saw him briefly. Gosh, the rain is absolutely throwing down now. This is going to be a nightmare out for them in this rain, and in fact I think we've got a red flag. Just saw the red light come on there on the Hamilton straight as I looked out of our window, and the session is being stopped, and I'm not surprised, to be honest, because I hope nobody's actually gone off. I think it's just because of the rain, because of the amount of water, so I hope nobody's actually gone off. It's probably just due to conditions, but whether they will pause the session... Oh no, I think there is a car off. Oh dear, there is a car off.
Yeah, and well, one of the cars that's off on our
number
screen.
16 is off there.
Now we can see
That's
it.
Mark Hazel.
And I think we've got another one off, possibly Ian Simmons as well.
Oh dear, he's in another Tyrrell, number 3. Okay, well that's, yeah, that rain suddenly started pouring down, certainly over this side of the track. That is the thing. I mean, we cross a border of counties here at Silverstone, and you can end up with one county dry and the other county wet, can't you? But suddenly it has just chucked it down.
And strangely, it's coming from the opposite direction to the rain we had in qualifying this morning. Yeah. It's hitting the other side of our commentary box.
Oh, you wouldn't really want to be out there now in this, I have to say. You need to bring those cars back safely. There is only a minute left in the session, so I'm sure that will be the end of the session. And rightly so. Even a modern Formula One session would have been red flagged at that point. They would not have allowed the cars to continue around in those conditions.